Well, my next guest is Ben Swann, who was sanctioned by the Biden administration for the crime of being a journalist. The Biden State Department placed sanctions on Russian news organizations, and they said so, that they were doing this in order to avoid misinformation in the run-up to the election, which is code for they wanted to continue to sell you a war so that they could win based on your fears. And so they sanctioned journalists who would not go along with that narrative. So that didn't work, but the sanctions remain in place. Ben Swann's company is a contractor for RT that was sanctioned, and he now is asking the Trump administration to remove these sanctions. Thank you so much for coming on Redacted to tell us about this.
Thanks for having me on.
Tell us a little bit about what happened to you by the Antony Blinken State Department and where it stands now.
Yeah, so the sanctions themselves, as you rightly said, were put on RT, right, as a news organization. So it's really three entities. It's RT, which is a television network that broadcasts internationally across cable around the world, even without being in the United States, without being in Western Europe, where they haven't been for 3 years now. They still reach 800 million people around the world, which is a pretty incredible number. It's one of the largest, if not the largest, TV network in the world. So they had already put a sanction there. They also put a sanction on Sputnik Radio, which is the radio version of it, and an entity called TV Novosti. And TV Novosti is the actual entity that oversees both RT and Sputnik. And so the Biden administration put these sanctions in place in September of last year, essentially saying that RT had helped to, get Trump elected the first time, and that Russia had interfered with the elections, all of those lies, which we know are not true. And so they had pushed these ideas for a long time. My company contracts with them, so we're not under sanction, but what we are not allowed to do is work with RT. We had American journalists and American producers and writers who were creating shows that we were selling to RT, and these were being broadcast, again, to 800 million people around the world every single week. And yet, those sanctions remain in place, essentially saying if you are an American citizen and you attempt to work with RT for anything, it is a crime. It is a crime against the U.S. government. You can be thrown in prison for it. You can have your bank accounts frozen and seized. You can't work for them at all. You can't appear on their air. And so it is this very bizarre thing that's taken place, because before these sanctions were put in place, no American journalist, no American news entity, and no foreign news entity had ever been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department or the State Department, ever. It had not happened in the past. Not when we're talking about, I heard your segment earlier about Nazis, right? There's been no Nazis who have ever been sanctioned. No news organization associated with Venezuela, with China. Right now, Al Jazeera obviously broadcasts in the United States. There's never been a sanction against Al Jazeera. And so we've never seen this before. It's totally unprecedented. And it goes into the theme of everything you're talking about today, Natali, which is that essentially these sanctions create an incredible example of where if we don't fix this and correct this, it can be applied to any news organization that the government simply deems they don't like the message, so they're going to ban them.
Yeah, I guess I will admit to you that I have been a guest on RT shows before, and these sanctions scared me because you don't know if they're going to hurt your children, if they're going to harm your ability to, make a living for your family. What are they going to do to me for just being a voice on a show that I can't reach? So what is there? So you're asking the Trump administration to rescind these, obviously. Is there, do you think, some surreptitious reason why they'd want to retain these in place?
I don't think they do. Listen, I would give the Trump administration the benefit of the doubt. They've been in office, obviously, for 6 weeks now. It's not a very long time. J.D. Vance, the vice president, went to Europe. He gave a tremendous speech in Europe about free speech and the rights of Americans to speak, whether you agree or disagree with what they have to say. And he talked about that specifically with social media. We see what's happening right now across the UK. People are being arrested and thrown in jail for things they've posted on Facebook. They make a comment on Facebook or on Instagram, and then that's a crime in the UK. And so the Trump administration has done a very good job of speaking out against that and telling Europe, listen, we have to uphold these kind of Western beliefs in free speech and the rights of citizens to speak. I believe that this particular issue is something that was kind of overlooked when Trump first came into office. Obviously, there's a bigger issue here with the war in Ukraine. I don't think that they're going to drop these sanctions before they come to some kind of a ceasefire agreement. I don't think that will happen for practical reasons. But one should not be tied to the other, in my opinion. It should not be until we get a ceasefire, we're going to continue to violate constitutional rights of Americans in this country. But I do believe, and from some conversations that I've had with various people in the administration, that the administration does not believe in this. They are against it. They think that Americans have the right to speak, and they believe that RT has the right to broadcast, and I believe they will remedy this.
Yeah. And I don't want to, I don't know if this is a correct generalization, but RT seems to honestly cover the Trump administration. And, you know, Trump is always accused of seeking out the media that he likes. So, you know, I don't think that the Trump administration themselves would have an axe to grind over specifically those outlets, but it shouldn't be that way. It really shouldn't matter. Free speech is free speech, and journalism is journalism. But you say that the bullying of social media companies by the Biden administration was corruption on display. Was there litigation on behalf of, I mean, we see the litigation of the social media companies, but was there litigation on behalf of the media companies you're speaking for?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question. What do you mean?
Like RT and Sputnik, did they litigate back? Is there, like, will we ever see a court ruling, or we really need administrative action, executive action on this? Sorry, I asked it in a dumb way.
No, so it's a fair question. And I think that, look, I've had conversations with a number of lawyers about this, whether or not there is a lawsuit to be had here. I believe there is. I believe there's a very strong case here to be able to sue. The problem is, first of all, it would take years and years to ever get to a point where it could be settled. It would be much easier to settle it with executive action, because it was instituted with executive action, right? Biden issued an executive order, and then it's been upheld through the Treasury Department, State Department, and OFAC. Having said that, I have had some very disappointing conversations with some lawyers about it who have said, listen, I agree with you on face value. You're right. This is something where it's clearly a violation of law. It's clearly a violation of constitutional rights. However, because of precedent, no court in this country is going to reverse a sanction that was put in place in the name of national security. And of course, all sanctions and pretty much everything that government does these days, they do utilizing the claim of national security. And so it's disappointing to me to hear that, but I think we can be realists about it. That's where we are in this country. If you slap the label national security on just about any issue, it is then deemed, well, this is necessary. And so I can't think of a single example where courts have overturned executive action saying, no, this really isn't national security. So especially since 9/11, we've grown in terms of that bureaucratic state and in terms of that part of our system to say there's far too much leeway given, in my opinion, to the executive branch and even to Congress to be able to deem anything national security. And it's upheld by the courts. It's upheld by everyone.
I guess that's disappointing, because it feels like we are all in a game of whack-a-mole at the whim of whoever's in the executive office. So as much as I don't have an appetite for litigation, I would like the courts to say, you can't do this, full stop, so that we're not, because, you know, if a Democrat gets back in office, they can sell you the war with Russia anew. So I guess I get what you're saying, though, that this is the way it has to be right now, because Americans are currently being sanctioned. So thank you so much for bringing this story to us. Follow Ben Swann on X. It's Ben Swann with 2 N's _ because he's posted this open letter. Maybe you can, elevate that in any way that you can if you have an X account. So thank you so much for bringing us this story.
Natalie, thank you.